candidates. Now let's ask them some questions. And Mr. Taylor, I guess you're first. Should the mayor have sole authority over the police department? Why or why not?
In our system of government, I don't think that the mayor should have sole authority over the police department. Our founding fathers gave us a system with separations of power, executive, legislative, of course judicial as well, and that's trickled down federal, state, and at the local level as well. So there's roles that the council has in terms of administering the police department. There's roles that the mayor has in terms of administering the police department. I think both of those roles are important, and they're a little different. The council's key area is the budget, the long-term vision, making sure we have the adequate financing for the police department. The mayor's side is a little bit more on the executive management of those personnel, making sure that through the city manager, who's the mayor's day-to-day person in the city, the mayor is able to have that vision, transmit a vision to the police department, and then have that get executed. So my answer is no, that's not our system of government. It's a balance between council and mayor, and that's something that's really important, I think, for good cooperation and for a city functioning well, is there to be a good balance and good cooperation between council and mayor, because each of the roles are really important, but they are a little bit different. At the end of the day, it's the city council that is going to take the votes on the issues, not the mayor. The mayor in our system doesn't have a vote. The mayor's responsibility, as I see it, is kind of falls into three areas which do relate for the police department or any other department in the city. The mayor has a big role, number one, in listening and making options. In any big decision, the proposal is usually going to originate with the mayor, listening to residents, listening to city staff, listening to the council and input from the council, and then coming up with some proposals and some options for the council to look at. The second role for the mayor is to represent the city, and then lastly to manage employees. So, thank you.
Mr. Bigler, you have 1 minute.
Okay. Although the mayor is the legislative branch, or excuse me, the administrative branch, and the city council is the legislative branch, they have different roles, but they have to work in unison together. And I think that's kind of been a struggle between the two. And I believe in using councils. There's a reason they're called a council. One person, if I'm the mayor or a council member or a father or a husband, I may overlook something. And the things I've been in charge of in my life, I use people around me to get their wisdom and their insights as well. And as mayor, I would do that with the city council. I appreciate all three of the current council members are supporting me for mayor. They want to work with me and I want to work with them. And we will work together to make the best possible decisions, not just for the police force, but for every decision that's made for you on your behalf in this city. I'm not on a power trip at all. We will do it right, and we will do it collectively together to make sure that in the end we come up with the best possible product for you and for our city.
Mr. Gary? 1 minute.
Well, if I was the mayor, I'd have full sole responsibility for the police department. I want to have a good police chief that run things efficiently. And I can see that the mayor has administrative responsibilities, but I also believe that he cannot run to the council for every decision that has to be made in times of emergency. And he should, I believe he should go to the city council and counsel with them on things that have to do with human resources or policies. But he cannot have such a close thumb on things that he's always being second guessed by the council and by the police chief.
Mr. Urich, can you get closer to that mic, please?
Yeah, I will.
There you go.
Eliminate the standing up and standing, getting down and up and down. I think that the city council needs to take the lead here and establish the criteria for hiring individuals in the various departments. The police department would be one of those. With that criteria established, the mayor is usually the one that will conduct the selection committee to hire those individuals. I think that the council would be involved at that level to make sure the right people are selected based on the selection criteria that they establish. From there, I would leave it to the mayor to run the city business, including the police department. I would expect that where there are problems, then there's talk back and forth. The mayor may go to the council for advice if there are unusual situations or problems to deal with, and vice versa. If the council recognizes some kind of problem, then they would bring that up and deal with it in the council meeting.
Thank you. It's been suggested that rather than have you get up and down and up and down, this isn't a BT formation. If you just stay at your seat and answer the question, Mr. Russell, for 1 minute.
I would agree with much of what's been said in that the mayor wouldn't have sole responsibility. On the other hand, the mayor is the chief executive of the city and is part of the executive branch of our city government, and therefore the buck would stop with him, and I would expect that the candidates would accept that also, and as a chief executive would have a significant responsibility there for where the buck stops. That being said, the system of city government is similar to the national government in that there are checks and balances, and certainly a willingness to deal with the council, with the staff, and with the chief, and whatever else needs to be done in the instance of the question that you asked, I think would be a wise thing to do, and I would expect that to happen, and there are controls in place to actually ensure that happens. So that's the way I see that. Thank you.
Mr. Swanson?
Waiting for the timer to go off there. There we go. I agree with what's been said. I'm grateful that we have a system of government in which there are checks and balances, where we don't have a sole individual who is responsible for everything and a sole individual who feels like they know everything. It's through councils, it's through deliberation, it's through the sharing of differing ideas that we get the best results. That's true for the police department, it's true for any other department within the city. When we're willing to put aside our personal agendas and realize that I don't have all the answers, and I'm willing to listen to you and to your ideas, that between the two of us, we're more likely to come up with a good decision, whether it's the police department, the sewer department, or anybody else. There's great wisdom and great strength in council. And so I'm grateful that our mayor would not be solely responsible.
Okay. The second question, and Mr. Bigler, I guess it's your turn to be first. What is the proper role of city government? Rank the following in the order you think they are priority, top priority first. Public safety, streets, roads, and public works, parks and recreation, building codes and zoning ordinances.
Well, I'm not going to rank them because they interconnect. If you're talking safety and roads, if you have rotten roads, it doesn't make it so safe for ambulances and so forth to get there. So those are very important. At my core, I try to make decisions in my personal life, and I have for you for 4 years, based upon what I believe are correct principles. And at my core, I believe a correct principle is this. One of them, you stay out of debt unless absolutely necessary. Sometimes it is necessary to get the job done, but that would be for me a last resort, not at the beginning. And so with that in mind, there are certain things that are very, very important. Public works is vital. That's our sewer and our water system and so forth. Public safety is important. So it all works together. The issue is the city takes money from all of us. The issue is what are we going to take your money for? What are we going to do with your money once we take it? And so I believe it's important to have the priority set to where we spend for the right type of things and for the right prices. For example, the public works facility, he mentioned public works. That's very, very important. But most of you know this. There was a $10 million bond that was voted on a couple of years ago. I voted against that. And we did a petition, the people did, and got that stopped. But we're going to do a facility, and it's really important to have a good facility, and we will, but it's going to be about, probably with no interest now, about $13 million less than it would have been. So I believe in having a balance not be so extreme, but I'm conservative in nature, but it's about prioritizing what's most important. Public safety, public works, that's all important. You can't say this one over this. They're both important. It's the frivolous spending that I would like us to eliminate in our city.
Mr. Uri, for 1 minute.
Well, I believe the city should be involved in doing things for the citizens that they can't do for themselves. So if I understand the question, public safety would include police protection. We can't do that for ourselves, so we've got to have a good police force, and I'd rank that number one. Streets and public works, I think I'd rank that right now. And along with that, building ordinances, I'm not a real ordinance fan. I think sometimes we have too many ordinances that are unenforceable. We do have to have some ordinances, so I would support that as maybe in third place. And parks and recreation, although I think they're important, I would that would not be the highest emphasis for me as a city councilman. But I would listen to the citizens too and try to help them in working through the things that they feel are important. But that would not be my priority.
Mr. Satterthwaite, for 1 minute.
I think the highest priority has to be things that have to do with citizen safety, of course, and our living conditions. That would have to do with our water system and our sewer system. So I would give those high priority. Those are things in our city that we can do for ourselves. We want to establish the proper planning and infrastructure so that those things that are most important to city residents happen as a matter of course, and we don't have to put a lot of attention to them, but that we have the infrastructure in place so that we can deal with emergencies immediately, where there's public safety involved or where there's the comforts of home having to do with sewer and water. The parks are a great benefit of the city, and I think that's one of the reasons we like living here, is that we are able to maintain those things, but those would be a lower priority. It's certainly important, and can be important if we properly manage the other items.
Mr. Russell, for 1 minute.
I'm a member of the dance band, and this kind of question is like whether the guitar is more important than the drums, than the keyboard, than the bass, and they all have their place. But in order not to evade the question, I would agree with the others who would say that public safety, our whole lives really depend on the safety that we have, so I would put it at number one. And number two, I would put as the streets and public works. That's a necessity that we have to keep us well and in good shape. And I would call the parks and recreation the guitar, and I have a soft spot for the guitar because that's what I play. And so even though I rank the others higher, I still love what we have. I agree with what's been said about one of the greatest and most wonderful assets we have are our parks and recreation facilities, and it's a real draw for North Ogden, and we're blessed to have them. But that's not to say that the zoning is not important either, because we count on that for the security of where we live and how we live.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I like Brian's analogy of the band. I can't imagine a society or a city in which any one of these elements was missing. If you've ever lived in a concrete jungle, you know how important parks are. If you've ever lived where there were poor or little zoning ordinances, you know how important those are. If you've ever lived where roads are poorly taken care of or poorly constructed, you understand how vitally important they are. If you've lived in an area where there is poor public safety, poor protection from our police department, you know how vitally important that is. So in my mind, I think if we try to segment any one of these and separate it out from the other, that a very vital part of our city would be missing, and what makes North Ogden, the North Ogden that we love, would be missing. So I mean, if you had to pin me down, I'd say public safety and roads would be number one, codes and zoning would be a close number two, and then parks would be number three.
Mr. Bigler, for 1 minute.
Thank you, and largely agree with much of what these gentlemen have said. I think it is difficult to prioritize them. So how I kind of made this prioritization in my mind was, if push came to shove in the budget, how would I prioritize these? And it would be based on my view of government, that it is to do things that the private sector cannot or would not provide in an economical manner, and I'd say certainly public safety would be the first thing I would fund if push came to shove, then public works, then our building codes, because those are really essential. We're not going to live in our house forever. We're going to sell it eventually, and someone else is going to move in, and they can't check that foundation. They can't look into the walls. We want to know that somebody checked that it was put to a standard, so that's important. I put that as third. And then Parks and Rec, which we have fantastic parks, and I love our parks. But again, if push did come to shove in the budget, I think the area we would need to put at the lowest prioritization would be the Parks and Rec. So that's how I prioritize them.